story in which unusually, within the space of one story, you play two characters on the chase.
Yeah.
Morton Dill.
Yeah, I think it's unique. I don't think anyone else has done it, but it just so happened that when I was cast as Morton Dill, it was known, I didn't know, it was known that Bill Russell and Jackie Hill were leaving the show at the end of that serial. It was episode 3 of The Chase. And what I didn't realise was that Morton Dill was my audition piece to play Stephen. Maureen O'Brien kindly, bless her heart, went up to Bill Hartnell on the Wednesday of our rehearsal and said she knew that Bill had been very distressed by the idea that Jackie and Russ were leaving. And so she went up to him and said, Bill, you like this guy, he's, you know, what about him? And he, and I'm forever grateful for him for this, he went to Verity Lambert and said, watch him at the producer's run-through tomorrow, because he might be just the guy to take over. Now, of course, 3 weeks was all the difference in time. I'm playing this stupid Alabama hillbilly who's visiting New York and has this 10-minute scene, which I guess most of you will have seen at some time. And it was most enjoyable. I enjoyed working with the team, and they watched me. And so after the recording on the Friday, they invited me over for a drink in the pub over the road and offered me the part of Steve. And 3 weeks later I was in episode 6 with a beard, or at least some fairly heavy growth, a bit more than you have there. And I was there playing Steve. So yes, a unique situation, no one else has done that.
No, absolutely. Followed up very swiftly by a much-loved story, The Time Meddler. Again, we're lucky enough to have all of that to be able to watch.
Yes, and I mean, and that was broadcast, I think, rebroadcast about 1991 or something like that. They showed it. The technology at the time was rotten, and consequently, I look at the serial. I mean, I've actually got a DVD copy of it. I've still got it on VHS, so I haven't seen it for years. But when you do see those old pictures, the quality of the picture is so poor. I mean, they really are bad. So when you get the DVDs where they've been cleaned up, my God, these restoration teams have worked so hard to make them look as good as they do look. They look far better on your domestic set at home than they ever looked even in the control gallery for the director when we were actually making the stories. And I mean, thank goodness for modern technology. It really is tremendous. I can't praise the guys who, when they do find an episode, they restore it to a point where it really can be viewed reasonably well. I think it's quite remarkable. I mean, Galaxy 4 was that was the second series, obviously. And Galaxy 4, one episode was found, I think, 4 years ago, and the quality of that is absolutely fabulous. But what we would have seen in the gallery, and what we could see on the monitors in the studio when we were making it, was nothing like that. It looked pretty average. Mind, it was what we were used to. But now, with pixelation and everything else that we get with digital television, it's remarkable that these stories stand up at all.
Yeah, no, and they look pin sharp and absolutely beautiful, you're right. So talking of Galaxy 4, like you said, we've got one episode that was found, which was great to see because it sort of finally put a lot more visuals around that story and we get to see sort of you doing your bit. I mean, how does that feel knowing that we have that one back, that tantalising glimpse, but the other three are just adrift?
Well, I was dreading the fact that they ever found any of Galaxy 4. I mean, it wasn't written for me anyway, it was written for Jackie and Russ. The main lead in the story was going to be Jacqueline Hill. And because they left the show, and William Ems, the writer, had not been told, he had to adapt his script. The story was accepted, and that was what was going to be done. So he had to adapt the storyline to take in Stephen. So Stephen ends up saying most of Jackie's lines, and trying to keep the plot like that. So I didn't enjoy making it, and we had quite a dust-up in the read-through when we read it through with the story editor and William Ems. None too pleasant, I have to say that, but it's just unfortunate that that's the way that it was. Because I said, well, I was brought into the programme to play a particular character and what Stephen was supposed to be like, and he doesn't appear, the character of Stephen doesn't appear in this story. So I was dreading that Teddy were found, but it's quite, it's interesting to see it, and now I would like to see the whole thing. However, we've got lovely Mark Ayres here today, who was responsible really for restoring my interest in Doctor Who. I'd been to one convention in Manchester in about 1998, and that was it. And I really didn't, I never looked back, I wasn't nostalgic about it. And then Mark came along with the idea of taking the original soundtracks, which exist, thanks very much to Graham, who's here today, as well. And those original soundtracks, it was the first time really I'd even thought about Doctor Who in 30 years. And I was asked to do the commentaries which link the visuals, add the visuals to what you can't actually see, because it's an audio recording only. And I think they work very well, but it made me interested in Doctor Who again. And a lot of my memories of Doctor Who come from listening to those recordings and doing those particular recordings of the commentaries. I'd forgotten almost everything about Doctor Who. And it's only hearing them that restored a memory which had long gone. There are still episodes, obviously episodes which are missing anyway, that I have no recollection of doing. I know that we made the 12-part Dalek Master Plan. I have no recollection whatsoever of doing the Feast of Stephen, which was set in Hollywood. And it was set in the Hollywood era of silent movies, which is something I love. I mean, one of my top favourite films of all time, it's in my top 5, is The General with Buster Keaton. I love the genre, I think it's fantastic. But even going to the more simplistic element of silent movies, when you look at stuff like The Keystone Cops and I won't say Charlie Chaplin because I never particularly liked Charlie Chaplin, but the Keystone Cops era and all that sort of stuff. That's what the Feast of Stephen got involved with. I love it, but I don't remember it. I listened to it, and I don't remember it. I don't remember any of the lines. I don't remember us doing it. I must have, but it's just not there. So I'd love to see it. I really would. I doubt if we ever will, but it'd be nice if we did.
Yeah, the kind of odd little Christmas episode, that one, with a bit of a run around. Well, just to sort of track back a little bit before that, we had the Mission to the Unknown, which didn't feature any of the main cast.
Yeah, it was a useful scene setter though for the master plan. I mean, it was a very clever idea, and then of course it gave us all a break.
That's what I was going to say. Did you get a holiday?
Oh, you got a week off. Yeah,
lovely.
I mean, it was really rare. We were going in and doing a show a week. We went in on the Monday, and we recorded on the Friday, and that was it. It's good job Maureen O'Brien's not here, because she says we recorded on the Saturday, but we didn't. We did record on a Friday. It was only a 4-day rehearsal with 1 day in the studio.
That's good stuff. And after that particular episode as a scene setter, it actually went on to the Mythmaker. So you were the Mythmakers, ancient Greece and all of the, the fall of Troy.
It's one of my favourite stories, that and the Massacre are my favourites. I've actually seen 3 episodes of the Mythmakers on the reconstructions.
Right.
I mean, I don't particularly like them. I think they're very clever. I don't particularly like them because the stills aren't the right stills. It's the only available still that they can put in there. And occasional little snippets of moving picture. Where the hell did those come from? But anyway, they put them together very cleverly, and of course they use the original soundtrack. So I have been watching it again, and it stands up pretty well. But I've forgotten a huge amount of it. Even though I've done the audio recordings, I always was convinced that Stephen, as I think he was called Diomedes or something like that, was it? Or Dimitri Diomedes, I guess. He has this fight. I was always convinced that I fought Hector. Of course I didn't. I fought Paris, who was Barry Ingham. In fact, I didn't really fight him. I yielded to him straight away, which surprised him immensely. And because I wanted to get into Troy to see if we could get the TARDIS back. But it's a great story. It really is a very clever story. And it's remarkable what we could do with those historical ones. And they weren't popular, you know. They would collect an audience of between 6 and 7 million, whereas anything with the monsters and the more sort of futuristic stuff would pull an audience of between 10 and 11, even 12 million. So they took a nosedive every time they did historical stories. And by the time they got to John Pertwee's time, they abandoned completely. They didn't do the historical ones. But essentially, those historical ones were what the series was originally created to produce. And I'm sure Maurice Hussein would agree with that it was, the scientific element was interesting, and it was an important vehicle for us to be able to do a bit of history. It was a semi, not educational, but it was supposed to be partly educational in what it did. That was the view of Sidney Newman when he created the serial. And it was a wonderful vehicle for that, but they abandoned that, I suppose, quite early on, after about 4 or 5 years. They said, no, we're not going to do those again, and they never went back into the historical context, which I think is a great shame. Of course, we've got great costumes to wear as well. It was nice to dress up. That's what actors like, you know, it was fun.
Excellent. And then, the epic, the Dalek Master Plan. Yeah. We have 12 episodes in total. 9 are still missing. So we've got some snapshots of the story. But is it one you particularly fondly remember working?
No, I don't. I remember doing it, but again, as I say, there's parts of it that I don't remember at all. But it was a very insecure time. Maureen had been summarily dropped from the show, which was, I think, awful. And she didn't even know about it until we came and got the scripts for the Mythmakers, when she discovered she was written out in episode 4. No one had spoken to her about it before then. And we brought in Adrienne Hill as Katerina, who was this handmaiden from Troy. And we thought she was the new girl. She was launched as the new female companion, not in the way that they launch people these days. I mean, none of that happened back then. It was a different time. But she was announced, and there was a photo call for her and all the rest of it. And she came in 4 episodes later. She's gone out to an airlock of the spaceship, end of Katerina. It was a bit insecure, and with that insecurity, we got Nick Courtney coming in, and I was convinced for a start that he'd been brought in to replace me. It was with great relief that Gene Marsh killed him. Wow, that was a lucky escape. So, I mean, it wasn't a happy time in that respect. Working was always fine. I mean, we don't just get on with it. You've got a job to do, whatever happens, you go in on the Monday, you're going to be recording the episode on the Friday, end of story, that's it. And so you just got on with it and did it. But it wasn't necessarily the happiest of times in that respect. We had a great director, Dougie Canfield, did a brilliant job with such a disparate story. I mean, it was extraordinary, the areas it went into. I need to listen to it again to remind me, actually, of some of the things that it did do. Of course, we brought back Peter Butterworth. Our meddling monk came back for 2 episodes as well. Always a pleasure to see Peter both on the set and off the set. So, I mean, we did have fun. I'm often asked, you know, there must have been terrible disasters and things. No, we didn't have time for that. We had to be much more professional in that. And the budgets for the programme, all the time I was in it, and all the time for the 80 episodes prior to that, the budgets allowed for 3 edits per programme, no more. Because it was 2-inch tape, very expensive tape, very awkward to edit, cut with a razor blade on a giant edit machine, and you had to allow for the sound head being here and the vision head being here, so there's a chunk of tape. What we're going to do with those bits, you had to overrun your run out at the end of a piece before you stop the tape, and then you had to have a wind-up time before you started the action as it came in, so that these could be overlaid. It was complex, it was expensive, and the budget allowed for 3 edits. So if you had the TARDIS arriving, or disappearing, or doing both, that's 2 edits straight on. So it was very, very difficult. A terribly tight budget, and it's amazing that the show survived, all things considered, but it did, and it still does.
Incredibly hard work, but which I guess to some extent makes it all the more galling, given the effort that went into it, that so much of it isn't there to be seen anymore.
Oh, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's 29 episodes of work that I did that doesn't exist. But Maurice was saying to me earlier in the green room, he said, well, nothing that I did for the BBC remains. Every single thing was wiped. He did plays for today, the Wednesday play, all sorts of major dramas. Nothing. It's all gone. absolutely gone, never to be seen again. And it won't be, it's very sad.
And talking of ones never to be seen again, of course, the Massacre, no episodes whatsoever.
Like the Mythmakers, nothing exists.
Yeah.
No. Again, I mean, it's such a wonderful story. And I've got a few things wrong when I've been saying this about the Massacre. I thought that the John Lucarotti book that I have recently read, the Target book, and I've read it on I've read it on BBC Audiobooks, I think. I thought that was his original story, which Donald Tosh said we can't film that, and he then rewrote it. That's not what happened. John Lucarotti wrote The Massacre. Donald Tosh didn't like it. He decided it had to be rewritten. He rewrote an awful lot of it. Lucarotti at one point wanted his name taken off it, but then demanded it came back on. Essentially, it's a Donald Tosh script with some original ideas from John Lucarotti. And in 1980, he wrote the novelisation, which I've read, which pinches various ideas from the rewrite, as well as some of his original stuff, and adding things that he discovered since. So it was something totally different. It's very interesting because the book, it's an absolutely wonderful story, is totally different from what we did on television. The television script is completely different. It's the same story, it's the same essential story, which when you think about it, was absolutely a ghastly time, a ghastly period of history that is there for a children's television program. I mean, we leave Paris knowing that most of the people that we had been involved with, that we liked, were going to be dead the following day. It's never stated like that, but that's the fact. It was quite a gruesome story. It was a terrible period of history, which actually the massacre didn't take place over one day. It took place over, I believe, a whole week. But virtually all the Protestants in Paris were killed, and it's frightening, frightening.
Absolutely, and Stephen being particularly concerned with Anne Chaplet, who was,
left
to her fate.
Why would Stephen? Yeah, and there's another thing though. I mean, we were talking about the insecurity element. We still didn't have a regular girl, because Jean Marsh, when she was asked if she would do it, she got another job to go to. So she, I think in a fit of pique, they disappeared her into a pile of dust. So she could not be the new girl, although it seemed like she was going to be the new companion. And then we come into the Massacre, and we've got Anne Chaplet, a lovely girl called Annette Robertson, who played that, and she was terrific in it. And consequently, I thought, and so did everybody else around, that she would be joining the team as the permanent companion. But no, we left her behind. And when Dodo came along, she strangely had the same surname, Chaplet. All right, that's very interesting. But as the name would pass down a male line rather than a female line, I'm not quite sure how that worked for history. There's sort of some subplots and considerations from various people that Stephen might have been involved in some way or other. But I don't think this is true. But anyway, that's something just for speculation, for dirty minds. So then we had Dodo, and so she's in the show, and that's tremendous. And after we'd completed the Gunfighters, before we went on to do the Savages, I think that's the order. Doesn't really matter.
But the Ark was her first.
The Ark was her first, and then we did.
And then Celestial Toymaker.
The Celestial Toymaker, followed by the Gunfighters, followed by the Savages. Well, I discovered at the end of the Gunfighters that they weren't renewing my contract at the end of the Savages, so I was going out there then. Bill was furious about that. His whole, the whole team that he had been part of. He'd been hurt when Russ and Jackie left. He'd been hurt when Carol Ann had gone before that. He was distraught when Maureen left. He was not so upset about the in-betweens when the girls just came and went. But he was horrified that I was leaving. I think I was his main support, and of course he was losing his capacity to remember his lines even more so by this time. And so I went, and following that, 2 episodes, 1.5 serials later, Jackie Lane's gone as well. Dodo leaves. It was a very unsettled period of time. And of course, shortly after that, poor old Bill went as well. So I mean, you can't get more, a more complex and changeable cast and arrangement than there was over that sort of, 14, 15 months not a particularly happy time in that respect. But I think all the stories were terrific, and I regret very much that Doctor Who has changed to where it is now. But today is where it is, and lots of people like it as it is. It doesn't suit me. I don't like it. I like the simplicity of the old stories. But maybe that's from a very unsophisticated time, and maybe I'm just unsophisticated. That's what
I'm sure that's not the case. I'm sure.
It is.
I'm sure. Yeah, so following the arc, of which we can watch every episode, there's a Celestial Toymaker, of which only one episode remains. A more unusual story. The sort of Celestial Toy Room, the solving of the puzzles, and
it was the first time, I think, that we had a character who could well be from the Doctor's past, the Toymaker. Michael Gough was brilliant. He was very sinister man to work with, I have to say. But it was great fun to do. That's a serial I do remember fairly well. That we had great fun because we were playing these games that we had to win. I know that they were preordained and we weren't going to get them wrong, but at any time there was jeopardy the whole way through it, and that was really wonderful. And the ideas and the characterizations of the characters that we met there they were just wonderful. Oh God. Hello. Carmen Silvera. Carmen Silvera played several characters. She plays a cook and she plays a clown, and we've got Peter Lawrence there, and I think it was Linda Sachs was in something else. But it was a fascinating time, and the games we had to play were tremendous. So that was a lot of fun. At the same time, the Doctor's disembodied hand is playing the Trilogic game, which is very cunning, 137 moves if you get it right. Any others but that, and we all die. And if we get our games wrong, we all die. So it's jeopardy all the way, which was a tremendous story. So it had tension. It was one I looked forward to. It was very colourful as well, but of course we only acted in black and white.
Yeah, the set photos are quite something, because they're all those colour rehearsal photographs, and it looks absolutely stunning.
Well, there are fewer photographs than I think there should be. I mean, there should be so many more stills, though I don't remember us having still sessions. I think a lot of the pictures that were taken were grabbed during the dress rehearsal of the show. Very few were set up. Stuff of the Ark. The photographs that exist from that, and there aren't very many of those either. They were shot mostly at Ealing Studios, where we went for one day to film with the animals in the jungle. So we had this lovely elephant called Monica, and there were snakes and all sorts of stuff. It's quite funny actually, because we're on one side of this clearing and the elephant comes through towards us. It wasn't shot with sound on that, but all you can hear is Mary Chipperfield, who brought the elephant, calling out, "Come on, Monica, come on!" And this elephant lovely. Great stuff, loved it.
Quite a co-star then.
Oh, definitely.
And the gunfight, we have all of the gunfighters, but again, kind of an unusual story. Historically, they tended to be European or British history, if those things were going to happen. And then suddenly the Wild West.
And why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a popular historical period, and it was a story that was reasonably well known, I guess, the gunfight at the OK Corral. I mean, it looks wonderful. I know lots of people don't like various things about it. They don't like the song which links it. But if you look at any Western made back in the 60s or 70s, whether it was on television or on film, very little was made on television, some on film, they all have a theme that recurs, and you hear it linking the bits. So it was not a silly idea, but it was an incorrect execution of it. There was too much of it, but it was quite reasonable. You have a recurring theme between each of the scenes as a bridge, and Linda Barron sings it very well. I sang it very badly, but I only sang it at gunpoint. You have to remember that. There was no way I was going to sing it other than at gunpoint. And Jackie ferociously hitting the ivories. She can't play either. I can't sing. No, so it was a good combination. Yeah, I thought it was a piece of. It was wonderful to look at. If any of you ever go to Riverside Studios when it existed, I don't mean back then in the 60s, but yeah, some of you have been, and you know what the studio was like. It really was quite small, and it wasn't very high. So if you think of the opening shot, if you go back and look at your DVDs of the opening shot of Tombstone, and you've got tumbleweed rolling down, it is a piece of beautiful film. And I swear that if the camera had tilted up a fraction, a couple of degrees, you'd have seen all the lights above. There was no room. And the length of the street there, it's beautiful. How do you do that in a tiny studio? Well, you do it with a backcloth. And that's all it was. It was in a square set. And there's the wall, and it's a beautiful perspective painting. It's a wonderful piece of set design. And Rex Tucker shot it magnificent. It looks tremendous. I mean, the things that are wrong with it are the sort of, I mean, how many actors were cowboys in that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 perhaps? And there's at least 27 different accents there. That was really quite appalling. But it looked great. I mean, I thought the Clanton brothers looked tremendous. They didn't sound great, but they looked terrific. They were always terribly menacing. And we enjoyed it. David Graham, who plays the barman, I mean, he's wonderful in it. I think he's on Next, isn't he? He's got the next thing in here. And he used a cotton wool in here under his bottom lip to make himself talk like this, you know. And he's the barman. It's a very funny performance. It's lovely. He's a cracking actor too, David. But we had a good time doing that. It was fun. And I've discovered something about myself, actually. When I played that, Stephen dropping the gun, tripping over his spurs, all those bits, I put those little bits in. Rex Tucker didn't say, don't do it, so they stayed in. And he shot it, that's fine. I don't think, actually, Stephen would have done that. Peter Purves would. So it was me playing the fool in it rather than Stephen. So I don't think I was very honest with Stephen's character in that. But I just want to have a bit of fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I was dressed as Roy Rogers anyway, so...
Well, you're allowed to have a bit of fun at work now and again, absolutely. And then finally, your final story, The Savages, which I think is often overlooked, in no small part due to the fact that we can't see it. But it means that we're missing your swan song. We don't get to see Stephen Lee. We can hear it, but we can't get to see it.
I've got a sneaky feeling that somewhere, and I think I've seen it, there is a clip of very poor quality of the bit where I decide to stay. I've got a memory that says I've seen it. It does exist, does it? Yeah. It exists, of course, in the audio, so you can get that. Yes, it's disappointing, but it was perfect. I think it was quite a nice exit. It's a far nicer exit than poor Dodo gets, 6 episodes later. I can't remember the whole story. I'd have to listen to it again to get it back in my head. I think it was a very good script, and I think it was a perfectly reasonable thing for Stephen to lead. Simon Guerrier has written a wonderful trilogy of audios for Big Finish, which takes Stephen on that planet, and I think they're wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed them. The first one's called The Wars Who End All Wars, so if you like the audio stuff that Big Finish does, and if you like audio at all, Big Finish does it better than everybody else. I mean, they win awards left, right and centre, well deserved. The production values that go into the stories are just tremendous, starting with very good scripts written by extremely good writers. So it's a joy to do them, it really is. But Stephen's character is explored on, and the nice thing about that is that I've been able, with Big Finish, to explore the character of Stephen in a way that I would never have had the opportunity to do on television. It would not have happened that way. So it's a nice extension. There's some great stories. I've got a new one coming out this year, which we recorded towards the back end of last year. I've heard it, and it sounds like I'm boasting. I'm not. It is a terrific companion chronicle, and for the life of me, I can't remember what its title is going to be. I think it's called Journey Across a Dark City, something like that. But anyway, it's a two-hander. You can work out for yourselves what it is. It's only me and Nick Briggs. So you can work out perhaps where that's going.
Possibly. Although with Nick Briggs it could be almost any monster from the Doctor Who canon.
Yeah, but there's only one that begins with a D.
That's the one I thought it probably was. That's the one I thought it probably was. Well, which is wonderful, like you say, it gives you that extra lease of life and the chance to do something with a character, which I think a lot of actors have said. They get a chance to do things with the characters that there just wasn't time or space to do on television.
No, and you couldn't be that indulgent with it. Anyway, the story was always the thing. I mean, there was story-led rather than character-led, I think. And I think Bill Hartnell he's been praised much today, and I think well-deserved. He was a terrific actor. And his doctor, you know, without him, we wouldn't be here today. This wouldn't have happened at all had he not been able to create something which had the longevity, that had the bosses who hated it believing in it. Because that had to happen for it to continue, and it did happen. And although they lost faith in Bill and got rid of him and brought in Patrick, once they realised they could do that, and it wouldn't affect the audiences and it wouldn't affect the output and how they could deal with it, I think they, well, talk about being on a winner. They didn't even know it was at the time. And it's now making, you know, it's a massive franchise, the BBC making an absolute fortune out of it. And something which Warris said to me earlier, which I agree with wholeheartedly, the important person who's totally overlooked in Doctor Who, nowhere do you ever see created by, that it should have Sidney Newman, and it's not there. It's not there, and it should be, because he created Doctor Who. Without Sidney Newman, it wouldn't have happened. It was in his head. The TARDIS, the whole thing, that was in his head. And he deserves massive credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to put that on the end of every episode. No, absolutely.